Back in October 2022, when that trailer dropped out of nowhere, it felt like the franchise had finally woken up. A Need for Speed with a street art look, cartoon-style smoke, characters with music video vibes, and even an AHAP Rocky feature to make one thing crystal clear. This is street culture. This is style. This is attitude. And for a few days, it worked. Because after years of the series feeling like it was running in circles, the new game felt different, bold. A real, okay, EA, you finally get it. But then reality did what it always does. It ran straight over the hype. Because today, looking back, the story of NFS Unbound is one of those downfalls that are both sad and strangely satisfying. Satisfying not because we want the series to die, quite the opposite, but because it's the kind of fall that feels like it was built brick by brick, decision by decision, until it became inevitable. And the craziest part is that the end didn't even need a dramatic announcement with sad music and white text on a black screen. It came in the coldest way possible. Support has ended, the team was reassigned. In February 2025, executive Vince Zampella said that the Need for Speed team at Criterion Games would be joining development on the next Battlefield, and reinforced that the franchise would return in the future, in new and interesting ways, in a statement echoed by GameSpot. Translated into gamer dialect. Guys, hang on. Not right now. But to understand why this hurts so much, you need to rewind a bit. Because Unbound wasn't born as just another one. It was born as the comeback. The saga had been coming off years of emotional roller coasters for the community. One game with a good idea, another with a weird direction, and a constant feeling of almost. The last one before Unbound was Need for Speed Heat. And like it or not, it became a reference point because it had that simple structure fans understand. Day to grind, night to risk it, cops as both threat and reward, and a pace you controlled yourself. Then came the announcement that felt like a return to the right roots. In February 2020, Electronic Arts confirmed that Need for Speed's development would return to Criterion. But the project didn't have a clean path. It was delayed, and part of the team was temporarily reassigned to help with Battlefield 2042. And that's when you start to smell it. When a game enters this back-and-forth mode, shuffle the team, pull people to another project, it usually comes out scarred. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's born tired. Even so, in December 2022, it arrived. The official launch was on December 2, 2022, with early access a few days earlier. And on paper, it was beautiful. A stylized visual mixed with realism, a city inspired by Chicago, cars shining in the rain, a strong soundtrack, that whole street racing with personality pitch. But the problem with big promises is that they arrive before the product. When Unbound launched, critics actually liked a lot of things. Overall, the console versions landed in the generally favorable range, while PC was more divided. And that's exactly the kind of contrast Metacritic makes very clear when you compare scores by platform. And it wasn't a throwaway game either. It was even nominated for Racing Game of the Year at the DICE Awards, which for a modern NFS is already a small moral victory. But the market isn't made of scores, praise, and nominations alone. It's made of people buying the game. And in the UK, physical launch sales were 64% lower than Heat's, and the game didn't even break into the top 10 physical sales chart in its debut week. Oh, but everything's digital now. True. But this kind of data is usually a thermometer for the initial buzz. And Unbound's buzz was smaller than it needed to be. And that's cruel, because the game had things that deserved noise. The style was a hit, period. It had personality. And in the arcade racing world where a lot of things start to feel generic, that's worth gold. But at the same time, it felt like the game was afraid of being a simple Need for Speed. And that's where the first crack appears. The loop. Unbound tries to sell you the life of an illegal street racer as if it were a work calendar. There's weeks, days, nights. Today there's an important event. Tomorrow there's a qualifier. And the idea isn't bad. Create rhythm, create tension, make you prepare. But in practice, a lot of players felt this turned into a leash. You're not in control of your own chaos. You're following a schedule. And when a street racing game turns into a schedule, it trades adrenaline for bureaucracy. The second crack was even more fatal. The separation. In story mode, you build your garage, your money, your progress. Online, it's another universe, different progression, different requirements, another grind. It's as if the game looks at you and says, "Congrats on your single-player car. Now start over, champ." And the worst part is that this wasn't some hidden detail. This shows up as one of the first reasons for player drop-off in official discussions. In a Year 2 roadmap post, there are players saying they quit in less than an hour just from realizing the single-player save is separate from multiplayer. For some people, that's fine. But for many, especially those who don't have 8 hours a day to grind, it feels like punishment. And then, while the game tried to pull you into online, it did so with the kind of stuff the community is already tired of. Passes, time-limited rewards, and that feeling of, you're not playing because you want to, you're playing because you'll miss out. And yes, that's a modern dilemma. How do you keep an online mode alive without turning it into a casino? But NFS has a specific issue. It's a nostalgia-driven franchise. People want to feel like they're moving up in life with their car, not like they're doing chores to unlock cosmetics. And when the feeling turns into a chore, the player disappears. Then you start seeing the signs in places that don't forgive romanticization. Numbers. On Steam, SteamDB shows the game hit an all-time peak of 14,063 concurrent players on December 4, 2022. By February 2026, the live number appears much lower, around Mach 1 to 2,000, with a mixed rating and roughly 60% positive reviews. And this part matters. This doesn't mean the game completely died. It means it lost what matters most for a game that wants to be a service: retention. Because racing is community. It's rivals, it's full lobbies, it's playlists rolling, it's one more race. When it empties out, the car still looks great, but the street goes quiet. The third crack was emotional, tone and identity. Need for Speed has always had exaggeration. It's always had cringe. The difference is that, in its best moments, the cringe was charming, kind of B-movie energy, part of the party. In Unbound, for a lot of people, the story felt like it was trying too hard to be cool, while locking you into tight progression. It felt like a campaign that wanted to be different, with short video language, but checklist structure. And the result is that classic fan reaction, "Man, I just wanted to race." This sentence shows up in 1,000 different ways in discussions. And if you look at comments on official announcements, you see everything. People saying, "There's nothing to do after the story," others replying, "Online is where it's at." Plus, complaints about the launcher and paid content. In other words, the community wasn't talking about amazing races. It was arguing about structure. The experience was fighting the player. Now, to be fair, Criterion did try. One thing Unbound did better than several previous games was updating. In February 2024, for example, there was an official post announcing a Y2 roadmap, literally one more year of live service, celebrating the franchise's 30th anniversary. At the time, that felt like a good sign. Okay, they didn't abandon it. But at the same time, the update model itself exposed the problem. A lot of the content came in catch-up packs, bundles meant to recover old items, and that triggered a very specific kind of resentment, because it feels like a shop that says, "Pay so you didn't miss out." In one catch-up pack announcement, Volume 5, you can see angry comments like, "I bought the game and I still have to buy more stuff?" The promise was post-launch content, and it did receive a sequence of updates released in volumes. In total, there were 9 volumes, planned as a Year 1 and Year 2 journey. There were volumes focused on cops versus racers, drift and drag, mechanical tweaks, new playlists, and that kept a loyal player base around for quite a while. But then the classic live service problem hits. Updates don't fix a crooked foundation. If the core of the game pushes you away, you can add a new sticker every week, and the car will still pull to one side. And the ultimate irony is that the last major update was perhaps the most Need for Speed of them all. Volume 9, called Lockdown. It introduced a high-risk extraction-style multiplayer mode, kind of PvP/PvE, and also added playable motorcycles for the first time in the series, a BMW S1000RR, along with new vehicles and online changes. It was the kind of idea that makes you go, "Why wasn't this here from the start?" But the shine didn't last long, because soon after, it started to sink in that this was the goodbye. On Steam itself, the Volume 9 Out Now post is dated November 26, 2024. And in February 2025, specialized gaming outlets reported that the game had reached the end of the road in terms of support, with confirmation that there would be no more content updates. Then comes the part that, for many people, was the final stab: the definitive package. At the end of 2024, EA also began bundling post-launch content into a Get Everything Now bundle, large upgrade, which for some felt like an opportunity, and for others sounded like, now that it's over, here's the compilation. And that triggers a very specific feeling in players, that they were pushed into a model that doesn't respect their time. And once again, the story closes the circle, the team moving to battlefield. By itself, that's not a crime. Studios get reassigned all the time. The satisfying part of the fall comes from the fact that Unbound felt like the perfect game to prove that Need for Speed still has a place in the modern world, and yet it missed the timing. It launched with weak physical sales in the UK, had a divided reception on PC, and spent much of its life trying to convince players that online was the future, while players just wanted an open world with consistent progression and memorable police chases. And when it finally landed bolder ideas like lockdown and motorcycles, it was already at the end of its cycle. And there's one detail that makes everything even stranger. Even after all this pause, the game kept showing up on new platforms and receiving scraps of life. The Amazon Luna version, for example, only launched on June 12, 2025, already at a time when everyone was discussing the future, or lack of it. Now, the lingering question is, was this the game's fall, or the fall of a strategy? Because you could argue that Unbound didn't fail artistically. It was one of the most author-driven Need for Speed titles in years. What it failed to become was a meeting place, a space where every fan felt at home. And part of that comes from context. Today's arcade racing competition doesn't forgive. You boot up Forza Horizon 5 and you get a massive world, constant events, a festival-like feeling. You open another game and you find seasons, crossovers, millions of things to do. And then Need for Speed, which should be competing through identity, chose to compete through systems, passes, grind, split progression, time-limited content. It's like trying to win a drag race by changing the hood decal. And there's another layer here: trust. The franchise spent years bouncing between directions. One game tries to be serious, another tries to be arcade, another tries to be a movie, another tries to be live service. Fans grow suspicious. They play with one foot out the door. They don't buy at launch. They wait for a sale. And when a game already launches with less noise, it starts its life at a disadvantage. In the end, Unbound's incredibly satisfying decline is the kind of story that feels written by irony. A franchise that wanted to be reborn with style, but tripped over structure. A game that nailed personality, but stumbled on retention. A live service that delivered updates, but never convinced its audience to stay. A final update that finally felt grand, and at the same time was a farewell. Then you remember Vince Zampella's comments that talk about listening to the community and returning in the future. And you realize that, as painful as it is, there's a real chance for learning here, because the community has made it very clear for years what it wants. Cohesive progression, police that are fun and tense without feeling like punishment, freedom to race your own way, and a game that doesn't treat you like someone who needs to be pushed by FOMO. If the next Need for Speed takes Unbound's visual courage, combines it with a simpler, more honest system, and treats the player as a partner rather than a user, it can come back strong. But until then, Unbound stands as a bitter reminder. Sometimes a game doesn't fall because it's bad. It falls because it tries to be everything at once, and ends up not becoming a place for anyone. And that's why, when the dust settles, the fall feels incredibly satisfying. Not because we wanted it to fall, but because, looking at the chain of choices, that's exactly where the road was pointing. And now I want to know, at what point did Unbound lose you? Was it the split progression, the grind that turned into obligation, or did you enjoy the direction and think it was one of the most stylish NFS games in recent years? Drop it in the comments.